everybody. I'm Scott Harkey, and welcome to another edition of Payment Talks. Excited today to have Ainsley Merchant with us today. Ainsley, welcome. Thanks for coming over to our office.
No.
It's nice to do this in person.
Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's great to be here. You guys have a lovely view. It's a privilege.
Not too bad. So tell me a little bit about what you do. Tell me about
sure.
your role. Tell me a little bit about your background, and let's learn a little bit about you.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So I'll start off with me and then I'll go to the role and all that kind of stuff. So I started off in regulation of all places coming out of uni. This is just after the crisis of 2008 and soul search, and I wanted to try and understand what went wrong and fix it. I thought policy was the way. Yeah, that's the youthful idea.
Can we jump to the end? How'd that work out?
Yeah, I didn't enjoy it at all. No, I think the lack of a commercial goal, and also the bureaucracy, just all of the things you'd expect with regulation. So I joined their strategy team, and a McKinsey guy sold me the kind of consulting dream, really. And with that, I left the then FSA, did a master's, and then joined BCG shortly after. Consulting for a few years, mostly focused on FS. And then after that, I did some startup stuff for a few, 4-5 years, really enjoyed that. That's where my payments expertise came in. And then I ended up at WorldPay. I joined WorldPay last year to drive their financial services growth team.
Okay.
So that's everything from defining the financial services value proposition for insurance, payfacs, trading, money transfers, lending, and so on. And then working out how do we develop that over time with the product team, like what do we prioritize, where do we prioritize, what partners do we need, all that kind of stuff. And then finally, how do we articulate this value proposition? And collateral, that's going into meetings and helping articulate it myself. And it's been a blessing. I've really enjoyed the past 7 months, got an amazing team. Get to come to fun places like Endava and have these fun conversations about the future of payments.
Well, that means you're in the perfect position to answer this question then. Right? Because one of the things that we've certainly seen is just how much change has happened in the payment space over the last 3 or 5 years.
Yeah.
I'm interested in what you think are some of the big drivers for that. Why does it feel like there's so much going on? Has it always felt that way? Is it just this moment in time? And maybe what are some things going on that you think about or you see?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the main driver, there's so many different drivers, right? But one thing that we talk about a lot is software-led payments. So this is, where do you decide what payment provider you want to use? Previously, someone would come into your shop if you're an SMB, or someone would call you up and say, hey, interested in payments, we can sell you a terminal or so on. But now a lot of customers, both in SMB and increasingly in enterprise, they're kind of software first. So the point where you want to catch them is on the software, right? So if you're a barber shop, you might have a barber piece of software kit that you're using to book appointments and take payments, and that's really going to drive your payment decision. And similarly for enterprise now, there are core systems. So I cover insurance. Duck Creek is a core system that's used in the insurance world. And enterprise players, insurers are thinking, hold on, we've got this piece of software that manages all of our claims, it does all of the processing, makes so much decisions for us. If we could have a payment system integrated into that solves so many problems for us. So that's increasingly where you need to get into as a payment provider. So I think, the software-led payments decision is probably one of the big drivers for us, and that's something we're doing a lot of work in terms of making it really easy to integrate WorldPay into those stacks. I think also there's disintermediation. There's so many different players that are adding value in different parts of the value chain now. And each of them have their own unique relationship to the merchant and sometimes even to the end customer that you need to account for. So we've got some merchants for whom they have an industry-specific fraud solution, and that is a must. So if you're not integrated into that, you can't even do business with it.
Right.
There are others who have an orchestrator who they really hold dear because they've saved them X amount, or they really work well with their flows. And if you're not in them, then it's not. So I think whereas previously we focused on coverage in terms of having the right APMs or being in the right markets with domestic acquiring and cross-border, now it's like, yeah, we also need to have coverage in terms of the right partners, the right integrations, and the right orchestrators. And so on.
It makes a lot of sense, and it certainly aligns to what we see as well. I guess what do you think changed on the customer side to where that they're looking to solve the problem that way, right? The combination of the two, both the kind of unbundling and looking at combining various solutions, as well as thinking about it from a channel perspective or embedded. Like why all of a sudden is that a thing? Do you have a perspective or a thought on that?
It's a good question. I think there's so many more ways to. So I guess I'd break it up into two. If you think about the ISV or the software providers, there's so much complexity around payments that often merchants are looking for the simplest solution. So if your core system provider has a payments offering that allows you to tinker with the main things you want to, and has decent coverage, you're going to go with that rather than build it all yourself. Right. And I think the more complex payments gets, the more you want a single provider to manage all of that complexity, especially at the enterprise level. And for SMBs, why they go into software provider is simply because they solve so many more problems for them outside of payments, right? They make their admin so much easier. They've got staff management on there. They've got staff management. They've got supplier management on there. They've got all of these different fixes for them.
So it's like a convenience thing, right? They can do more in one system, or when they only have to train their employees on the use this one system, and you can do all these things. Exactly. As opposed to this system for this, and this system for this, and this system for this.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Do you think it's largely technology enabled, right? Because I kind of go back to it's easy to see why that makes sense, right? Especially for the SMB if you're just trying to manage the business. And what we hear a lot in that space is just that of like, look, I'm just trying to run my business. I don't have time to deal with all these other things. So I need to make it really easy, right? There's a sense I have of that's always been the need or the desire, right? But why now? And what's different about now that makes it such a prevailing way of kind of bringing product to market? And maybe think about that question in the context of WorldPay, and like, how are you responding to that as a company, right? How is it influencing the products or services that you take to market? Are you thinking about customer segments the same way? Are you thinking about, product kind of scope and breadth the same way? Maybe how is it influencing how you think about taking the products to market?
Yeah, so I think a big part of it is, that convenience thing, it changes vertical to vertical, and increasingly it's more verticalized. So whereas previously you might have had an ISV that looked at, I don't know, they might have said, oh, we do restaurants. Now there'll be a specific ISV for, what's a good example? Like food stores, or there might be one for fine dining, or one for hotel restaurants, and you can link the bookings to the hotel, all that kind of stuff. So with that specialization, our approach has been to say, let's just make ourselves as easy to work with as possible. Part of that is getting a good API and dev portal in place. We've also acquired Payrix, who allow us to be really flexible as to how ISVs work with us. We have acquiring as a service. If you want to take on more responsibility yourself, you can be a full pay fac, and we'll just give you the tech that you need. So there's a lot of flexibility. And I think that's really been it. Rather than try to predict who's going to win, just make it as easy to work with anyone is kind of been our approach.
Yeah. Well, a lot of what we're talking about is fundamentally embedded payments, right? As we would now kind of phrase it.
Yeah.
Do y'all think about it that way as well? Is it emerged as kind of a segment or a particular product line, or what you think about it? Or is it, these are just the core products that we build, and like you said, we're trying to make them open as flexible as possible, And if the if the ecosystem wants to consume it that way, then great. We don't really care. Or again, maybe tell me how you think about that.
Yeah, I would say it's the latter. I would say we're pretty open as to how we do think about it as embedded payments, but I don't think we're super prescriptive as to how people consume our functionality.
How do some of these things affect your kind of overall strategy? It was just really interesting hearing you describe your role, because it sounds like part of what you do is thinking about how you take these things to market. Right?
Yeah.
When you think about differentiation, or just how WorldPay sits in the market relative to peers or to competition, how do you think about that? And how do you think about competition and differentiation and all this?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think traditionally, before this shift that we're talking about, WorldPay's advantage was always scale, coverage, and flexibility. Right. So if you're a multinational and you've got all these different operations in different regions, you could go to WorldPay and say, hey guys, I know you've covered that market, you need those APMs. Right?
Exactly. I can get to these APMs, these markets, whatever. And everybody was competing on their kind of coverage map, was how many countries can you cover?
Yeah.
Acceptance and how many APMs do you have, et cetera.
Exactly. But I don't think that's enough anymore for us. I think that works for, it works in that old model, but in the model where there's so much, there are so many different components and platforms want specific integrations, and it's more about what we were saying before, having the coverage across the right partners with the right orchestrators, with the right forward solutions. So whatever the customer needs are, not just across coverage, but also for functionality and also for very specific players they want to work with, we can meet that. So we're trying to be very strategic with that and get our prioritization right. A big part of that is prioritizing existing customers, because they drive a lot of our volume. But then also where we don't work with people, how do we assess in advance where the big opportunities are and where hence we should be integrating or partnering.
That was the next thing I was going to ask you. Is how do you prioritize? Is it customer led? Is it do you run some sort of analysis of the market and say, okay, well, in our current customers or in target customer, this solution or this particular provider comes out more often than not? How do you think about that?
It's not an easy thing. I can talk for my vertical. So we think about it in terms of everything comes down to a business case, but we tend to prioritize existing custom just because the revenue attached to it can be, it can go on for so long if you don't maintain a good relationship.
It's an opportunity.
It's already there. It's actualized, right? So there's no potentiality with that one. So that's normally the priority. What do existing customers want? And then when we look at potential, that's where we have to do a little bit of business casing to say, okay, great, we want to expand into this market, and this is what the value proposition looks like there. Where are the gaps? And then for each of those gaps, what is the dollar attached to it? Is there a partner we can work with who solves all of them? Who are the preferred partners? Who are the growing partners? So it's complex. Like everything has to be broken down. And then there's also the question of, do you build it yourself and try and start from scratch? I think that's less and less an appealing option because things are so fragmented and each of these solutions are so complex. Building it yourself, it's just a little bit too risky, right? You could invest all this money and then the market moves somewhere else. It's just the nature of how dynamic and shifting things are at the moment.
But if ultimately everybody has that strategy, right? And everybody integrates into everything, then what do you differentiate?
Yeah. I think, to be honest with you, if we go back to our core, which is the scale, we still are, we still offer the widest coverage in terms of regions. So for those multinationals or for those who are growing into new markets, if we've got I'm trying to find a word for it. Is it interoperability? I guess being able to integrate with all of the different partners. Let's call it interoperability for now. If we've got that ticked off, then it's a matter of, do you have the right markets as we're growing? Like, do you have the right APMs? And that's something we've always had as a strength.
Yeah, so you lean on the core thing that's always made the proposition strong.
Exactly.
And you adapt to the new market, which is, it's not just that, it's also integrating into all these channels or into all these partners.
That's exactly it. Yeah. And also flexibility. That's one thing that I think differentiates us. There's two approaches, right? You can either say, right, we'll do all the right integrations, but then when it comes to the tweaking, because everyone needs a bit of a tweak, we're not going to do that because we want a standardized proposition and we don't want all of the messiness that comes with different customers on different variations of a platform. We're often a lot more flexible with that, and we just deal with the mess in the back end. And I won't name names, but when we come up against some competitors, we often win on the fact that we're able to be a little bit more flexible in meeting a customer need. And it might be for a certain integration, it might be for even the regulation and compliance front. You know, there's a lot of models that I've worked on in the past 6 months that have, you know, are quite an innovative take on the traditional categories of, you know, payfac, referral model. Like there's stuff in between that you can work with as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think, you know, one of the advantages of the seat we sit in is we see a lot of different partners work in a lot of different ways. And, you know, I think we certainly see some customers that what they prioritize is that flexibility of the platform, right? There are other customers that they just want the turnkey thing, right? They either it's a sophistication or it's a simplicity, you know, they're trying to simplify the environment or whatever, but they don't want that complexity. And so it's just an interesting, I guess, validation of like, there are different types of customers that have different needs, and you know, the ones that align to the way you guys are kind of going to market will find a lot of value in that, right? There may be other ones that have different needs and it doesn't resonate the same way, and that's just kind of the normal competitive market. But I think the intentionality is the important bit, right? Like, this is how we're going to show up, and this is how we're going to play, and this is how we're going to differentiate. Yeah. Because then I think it creates the clear understanding of, you know, again, if you're the type of customer that values these things, then we can be the best at that. Yeah. If it's not what you value, that's cool, right? Exactly. Different, you know, partner is probably the better answer for you. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important to, again, have that intentionality and kind of go to market. Yeah. It's all trade-offs. I mean, we do, many of our customers have a turnkey solution. Sure. It's just that if they don't, then we can, you know, we can accommodate. One of the things you mentioned earlier was partners, and I'd be curious in your perspective of, you know, so you both integrate into lots of platforms, and that's one thing, but you also have partners that you mentioned, especially as you think about kind of how you expand or how you reach different markets or different product segments. What's the difference in a partner and just like another integration point, right? How do you think of those two things as different? So I guess there's different types of partners. Some we work with purely as referral, and we'll have a technical integration, but mostly referral model. There are some partners where, you know, we will have them take on a little bit more of the, I guess, the payments value chain. So rather than just refer and we'll send you a little bit of money, it's if you do want to own the customer relationship, do you want to take onboarding and maintenance? There's a little bit of, again, to that previous point, flexibility around how you partner with us now, especially in the States where we're currently working with Duck Creek. You know, they're launching Duck Creek Payments, working with us in a similar way to that, where they're taking on a little bit more than you typically would on the referral. They own a lot of the payment proposition. For all intents and purposes, it's there. You know, and when we don't have big egos about being the name on the label, but yeah, I guess there's flexibility there. You view partnerships as a key part of, I mean, you kind of mentioned earlier, right? But it's a key part of the strategy and how you reach different parts of the market. For sure. Yeah, I think for us, for the customer, it reduces complexity in a huge way. Reduces the integration complexity because put the pre-integrations in place. In the case of that Creek example I mentioned, and others where, you know, they're taking on some more of the maintenance and support, it also reduces supply management complexity.
can reduce reporting complexity as well. And then there's also the piece around innovation, and this is a little bit more loose, I suppose, but just being entrenched in a partner ecosystem, you hear about a lot of the other kind of tangential pain points that the customer's experiencing, and that even for our team has helped evolve what we think are priorities to develop for our roadmap.
Yeah, that's an interesting lens on it, because it makes total sense if you get a broader view of the end customer, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to just thinking about them in the part of the journey that you're part of today.
Yeah,
The partner can help show you more of that journey, right?
exactly.
Maybe that influences the way you think about the product, and whether it's pain points or additional features that you could add, et cetera.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good perspective. If we pivot a little bit and think about the future,
Yeah.
right? Where are we going with all this? Like, what's the next phase of payments, and where do you see something that either is exciting to you, or that you think it's going to be a big area of growth? What do you kind of see on the horizon?
So every time I speak, I really try and avoid AI, because it's just the latest thing where in every single podcast you watch, it always comes up. But unfortunately, I can't avoid it when you ask that question, because I think agentic payments and having a bot that you've pre-authorized to do payments, and you can simply ask, hey, I'm looking to have a exciting top for next week. Can you provide some options? It goes and sources different options, gives you a little preview, click, authorize, and that's it. It's sent to your home. I find that really exciting. I think there's a lot of things we need to get right, especially the authorization. I don't know what the integrations look like. I also don't, it has nothing to do with payments, but I'm also interested in how, how the AI commercializes that, but in a way that's fair, if that makes sense. How do you decide which sites you go off to? There's a lot of questions, but I think it's an exciting opportunity.
The irony of that answer is I gave that exact answer earlier today to that question.
Really?
I feel the exact same way about AI. I hate that it's the thing I always answer with, because it's so cliche, but I absolutely believe it is the most fundamental change, certainly in my lifetime.
Yeah.
And it will just upend everything in good ways and in bad ways. And I also am a huge payment nerd. So the idea of agentic payments and taking us to a scenario where you're not having to facilitate the payment with a set of experiences. They're all about clicking through a payment flow, right? You're not having to go through a shopping cart and log in and do this and that, but that it can happen in the background. The example that I read about earlier was kind of tying it back to the first major kind of new payment experience in digital was the Amazon one-click checkout, and just the impact of that. And then the next one was the Uber checkout, right? Where it was like, it's all behind the scenes. You still had to load your card, but then it's behind the scenes. You get out of an Uber, there's no payment interaction, and just how advanced that was. And that, agentic commerce is kind of the next big thing in terms of payment experience.
Yeah.
When we finally get it right, the amount of things it can enable and the friction it removes for the individual, right? Because no one wants to pay for things. You just want the outcome of the exchange, right?
Yeah.
And it has the real potential to really enable that in a whole new way. And it's just so fun to think of the examples of everything, right? From, booking a trip to an individual restaurant to an item that you want, to all these things. And if you combine the power of the data analysis and conclusion that the AI can create with the empowerment to go take action on your behalf in the context of commerce, like, it starts to get really fun.
Yeah. Big time. Big time. Yeah, it's super exciting. There's a lot of questions around it. And my mind immediately goes to, all of the potential pitfalls and problems of regulation. But I think if we crack it, it's super exciting.
Yeah, lots of problems to solve.
Yeah.
Right? Or lots of hurdles to work through.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the last thing I'll ask you is, if you're giving advice to someone starting new in the space, right? Whether it's someone who wants to go start a new fintech, a new payment company, or they're starting in a big organization or whatever. Like, what's your advice for them, or where do you point them for going to start their journey?
I would say to solve a really niche problem that has been yet undiscovered. and then try and make yourself critical to the business that it relates to, and then payments will come. that's what I would say. You know, and it might be that it's an ISV, like you mentioned before. I think that's a good way to go, but a lot of those avenues have been explored. You can get really, really, really niche until you're looking at like craft breweries in London or whatever it is. But
ironically, we work with a company there in the US, but they build payment systems specifically for craft breweries. It's craft wine shops.
Yeah. I mean, I think
so it does exist as a business. No segment's too small. That's what's amazing.
This is the thing, yeah. So that's exactly what I'd recommend. And it might even be fraud. It could be a advanced, but really niche problem. Fix it and make yourself indispensable.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much for the conversation.
No, I appreciate it.
Coming by, and thanks everybody for checking it out.
Thanks.